This is Trek Coach coming to you live from Noosa, and I'd love to welcome today Heather McNeice, who's a local lawyer, a photographer and a trekker, and most recently the author of her book Yak on Track, which I'm enjoying reading at the moment and getting very excited about because I'm venturing off to Bhutan next March to trek on the Chomalari Base Camp Trek. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. You've trekked across Bhutan for how many years now?
Since 2011, so I've been every year since then, and twice in 1 year. So yeah, I've lost count actually. I think this is the 9th.
The 9th year, wow. So you've done a lot of treks. Out of the treks and hikes that you've done, what would you say would have been your favorite ones?
I think Ganga Punsum is my favorite trek. So I did that last year. It's an 11-day trek from central Bhutan. Bhutan goes straight north up to the base of Ganga Punsum, which is on the Tibetan border. And then we cut down through a separate valley and sort of did the loop. But it's very remote, very untrekked, which is the appeal for me. We saw huge numbers of yak herders. We went in October and they're bringing their yaks down from the high pasture. So that was amazing to see. Dozens of families, hundreds of yaks spread out along the valley. So we saw one other trekking group and we had to do a river crossing on that trek, no bridge. So we're wading across not super deep water, but knee-deep glacial freezing water, and the other group decided they weren't up for that. So, so they turned back and we kept going. And we had fantastic weather, which was a big bonus. But yeah, so that's my favourite trek. Doing it again in October this year.
Wow, that's exciting. How did you get into trekking?
In my 20s, my husband Graham and I went to South America for 6 months. So we started off in Venezuela and went down the western side, right down the Andes. So spent a lot of time in the mountains. We went trekking from Merida in western Venezuela. And that was my first introduction to a multi-day trek. I was probably 2 weeks out of an office in London with very little preparation. So I learnt the hard way. It's tough when you haven't been walking and training for treks like that. And then we did Machu Picchu and various other treks in South America. So yeah, it's something I've done for a long time.
So would you say that from that experience to then taking on the huge endurance trek that you talk about in your book, which is 240 kilometers across the Himalayas, what was it about training for those treks that you now know how to do, and how did you prepare for that endurance trek?
So this trek through Lunana, which is the latter 2/3 of the Snowman Trek route, was challenging in terms of the physical demands of the trek. 240 kilometers, mostly above 4,000 meters. So I felt that my fitness level had to be at a fairly high level. So lots of stairs. Stairs in Noosa. There's another set of stairs in Budrum that not many people know about. So Noosa has 200, Budrum has 150. I go up and down those. My record in Budrum's 28 repeats. So
wow.
Lots of stairs, long walks, and trying to do a long walk back to back. So do one day, do one another day, because on this trek we had 16 days of walking. And then just general fitness. I go to the gym, weights, circuit training, that sort of thing, boxing. So yeah, something every day was really my regime.
Excellent. And when you're out in the mountains, because you've obviously trekked over the years with many different groups of people,
yes,
what are some of the most important lessons that you feel you've learnt about people in a wilderness setting?
I think people obviously need to have that base level of fitness, and anyone I take, I try and, if they don't live here in Noosa and train with me, then I try and make sure that they are training and keeping up with that. But it's actually really difficult to predict. I've had people one girl I'm thinking of who lived in France at the time, in the Alps, very experienced in the mountains, but was outside her comfort zone, I think, just being so far removed from communication, being in touch with her family, all that sort of thing. So she was very anxious about all of that. I've had someone who was anxious about thinking they were getting sick, but probably they weren't. They were just making themselves sore tummy, headache, and the anxiety sort of kicked in there. So it's actually hard to predict. Sometimes it's the people you think are going to be good, who just flounder a bit outside their comfort zone. And other people, I've had someone come who'd never been camping, never mind hardcore trekking, and they did great. So yeah, it's been a real mixed bag.
It's a real leveling ground, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just can't pick it.
Yeah.
How do you train for altitude?
How do you train for altitude when you live at sea level?
Yeah.
It's tricky. I don't think you can at this sort of elevation. I think having that base level of fitness is essential. So if your body's struggling with the altitude, at least it's not also struggling with the fitness aspect of it. I've never used these altitude chambers, and I just wonder if you're doing it once a week, twice a week, even 3 times a week, is that really enough? So walk up slowly, walk higher in the day, sleep lower at night, that sort of thing. Just the general common sense approach to altitude, but I don't think you can really train for it at sea level.
It's probably more about what you do when you're actually there, right?
I think so.
Walking really slowly, hydrating well.
That's right. Eating well, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah, letting your guide know when you're not well, so that they can help you take precautions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, lovely. What are your favourite 3 pieces of gear that you can't go without when you go on a multi-day trek? I know that's hard.
In the mountains, down jacket. I could not go anywhere without my down jacket. Just love it. It's so warm. For the camp at night, all that sort of thing. I've slept in it, I've walked in it, so yeah. Walking poles, I think, are essential.
Yeah.
I had never used them until I started going to the Himalayas, but you get into a bit of a rhythm, and the science says that they do improve your efficiency in walking, and just for river crossings and stability and all that sort of thing. And then a great pair of boots. You can't go past having a great pair of walking boots, because you don't want to have blisters, you don't want to have sore feet. So that's essential, and obviously breaking them in seems common sense, but I've taken a trip for a major travel company in Australia where I had a lady who took her boots out of the box when we got to the hotel in Bhutan, and funnily enough she had blisters. Yeah.
What's your next trek you've got coming up in just a couple of weeks now?
Yeah, well actually on Thursday I'm off to Mongolia, so I'm trekking in the Altai Mountains to the Potanina Glacier, which is about 4,500 metres. 4 of us going, and it's camel supported, so that will be a new one for me. I've had horse supported and people supported, but never camel. Okay. So yes, all our gear goes on camelback and we carry our day pack, so that's my next trip. Yeah.
Excellent. And how many of you are in the team?
There's 4 of us.
4.
Yeah, 4.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
How do you manage getting away from family? Because I know that's often a challenge, especially for mums and dads who've got young children at home. How do you get everyone ready before you go and manage taking that time away for yourself?
Well, I'm lucky in that Graham, my husband, works from home, so we can both be flexible. And he also likes adventures overseas, different to my adventures. He's a runner, so he's running the Arctic Circle Marathon, he's running the Great Wall of China Marathon, he's been to Everest Base Camp. So he's gone and done his thing, and I stay home and look after the kids, and vice versa. But having teenagers makes it easier. When they were little, I used to cook meals and leave them in the freezer and all of that. Now they just get takeaways. I think they quite like it when I go away.
What is it that you love about trekking that gets you going and coming back for more and more?
I think for me, the thrill of it is being in the middle of nowhere. I just love to be in the wilderness, in the mountains. No one can reach me, no one can phone me. We have a satellite phone for emergency, but thankfully that's never been needed. And just, I suppose, the fitness goal, to have that at the end of the year. I tend to go in October, November, so it's training throughout the year. And it's a great motivating factor to have something to work for rather than just going to the gym for the sake of going to the gym. But when I'm there, it's just the beauty of the mountains and being away from everybody else.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? It just rejuvenates you, and you come back and have
feel
energy
refreshed.
for everything.
A better person, better mum, better lawyer, better whatever.
That's wonderful. And you've, throughout the years that you've been trekking in Bhutan, Heather, and you also cover off on this in your book, you became connected with a charity.
Yes.
And tell us a bit about how that happened, and you know, what is it that I guess touched your heartstrings in terms of combining that then with all the future treks that you took there?
So in 2010, I went to Bhutan for the first time with my daughter Molly, my oldest daughter. And she was 11 at the time, and we went to a very small rural school in Pobjika Valley in Bhutan and visited the school. And I guess having Molly there as well, we were struck by the lack of resources in the school. Also just talking to the teachers, the fact that some of those kids walk several hours a day to and from school, no school bus, no roads actually out of one section of the valley. And I came back to Australia and I thought I'd like to be involved in, I'd like to go back to Bhutan and trek, and I'd like to be involved in something that would support a school or support a group of students in Bhutan. My dad was a teacher, and I guess education sort of in my family, and I'm passionate about education. So I was put in touch with the Australian Himalayan Foundation, which is a charity in Australia, has health and education programs throughout the Himalayan region. And they had just launched a Bhutan program in conjunction with an organisation called Renew in Bhutan, which stands for Respect, Educate, Nurture and Empower Women. So Renew was set up by one of the previous queens. A previous king was married to 4 sisters, or is still married to 4 sisters. So one of those queens set up Renew to address domestic violence issues in Bhutan, and as part of the work they were doing for that, they discovered that in broken families, where there's a lot of stress in the family, especially in remote communities where there's a big distance from a local school, that kids weren't going to school, and mainly girls. So those children would have to go to a boarding school because there's no local school they could get to and from in a day. The cost of that is about $200, the boarding cost. And I guess if a family had that money to spend, they would tend to send a son rather than a daughter. So that old preference, boys over girls. So I decided to become involved with that program, and I took a trek to Laya in the northern part of Bhutan that year, 2011. And I've done that ever since. So we've used the trek as a focus for the fundraising. Everyone who's coming on the trek's encouraged to be involved. We have a Go Fundraise page. The money goes straight to the Australian Himalayan Foundation. And then I got to the stage with friends and family that I felt they were running away when they saw me coming, because I'd asked for so many donations. So now I tend to organise events locally. So we just had a ball on Saturday night in Noosa, and every year we have a ladies' trivia night at the boathouse that's run by a drag queen for us, so that's a really fun night. Wow. Everyone dresses up, and we usually have a lunch or some other event during the year, so that's how we raise the money. And I visit with Renew and the kids who are supported by the programme when we go to Bhutan, so it just gives it an added dimension, it makes it very worthwhile.
That's right, and I think that combination of having a goal, like you've mentioned, to train for yourself, but also feeling like you're giving back to people.
Yes.
And being a part of the community while you're there is a very powerful combination. How did your book come to life? I mean, I know that writing a book is just, I guess it's probably harder than climbing a mountain in many ways, because it's something that you pull together over time. You then edit it, and you're always wondering, who out there is going to read it.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
It's a big journey, isn't it? So tell me, what were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you eventually make it all come together?
Well, it's been a labour of love, I think.
Yep.
So it's about the trek I did through Leinana in 2013 with Norby and my trekking buddy Krista. So just the two of us with our support crew and guide. And we were stuck in a blizzard for 3 days on that trek. So we had some challenges over and above the physical challenges we expected. So when I got back and told some of the stories, and people said, "Oh, you should write a book," and I was actually having my hair cut, my hairdresser said, "You really should write a book." And I thought, actually, maybe I could write a book. And I had sort of thought of it, just because so much happened on that trip. And I started writing, I wrote it all down, took about a year. Late nights, early mornings, school car park line, all of that. And so by the end of 2014, I had it all on my laptop. The following year, I didn't open the document. I just was so over it. The following year, I pretty much rewrote it. And then at the start of last year, I thought, okay, I need to focus on how do I find a publisher? Is anyone going to, like you say, is anyone going to want to publish it? Is anyone going to want to read it? So I've tracked down through a friend of a friend, a literary agent in Sydney, and she took it on and sent it out to some publishers, and a firm press in Melbourne have agreed to publish it, so here it is. In terms of what was most challenging, it was all quite challenging. Finding an agent was challenging. I felt it took ages to find a publisher, but actually I think it was probably quite reasonably fast in the end. But then the edit process I found quite a challenge, because we ended up taking out about 17,000 words, so that was quite a big chunk for me, but I think it's a better book for it. But yes, just having someone pore over the writing and you know, suggest changes, not necessarily make changes, but suggest changes, that was quite challenging. But we got there in the end.
And Heather, if someone wants to buy a copy of your book, where would they go? To your website?
Through my website, but also, which is heathermcnice.com, but also most of the local bookshops have it. Someone just sent me a photograph this morning of it in a bookshop in Canberra, so it's in lots of bookshops. It's also online, Amazon, Book Depository, Fish Pond, all the usual online. It's also on Kindle.
Excellent.
So yeah, just Google Yak on Track and it should be there.
We will. I'm really enjoying reading it. Just thinking back, I know you've mentioned that the trip that you did with Norbu, which you write about in your book, there was many challenges. If you think about what your toughest experience has been on a trek, is it that experience? And if so, how did you get through it and what did you learn from it?
3 days in a blizzard, very different sort of experience. And I'm not sure we could have really done anything differently on this one. We were just unlucky with the weather. The one thing that it wouldn't have changed anything, but it might have made it slightly easier, is we kept our horses, and most people change horses to yaks at the midway point of this trek. So had we done that, we wouldn't have had such a struggle getting the animals through, because the horses need to see a trail, whereas yaks can sniff the dung of animals who've gone before. So if there's snow on the ground, the yaks can find the trail, whereas the horses need to be shown the trail. So that was something I didn't know in advance, but it wouldn't have affected obviously the weather or where we had to stay or anything like that.
Heather, if some of our listeners want to contribute to the Australian Himalayan Foundation, or is in specifically the Renew project, where would they go to do that?
So the Australian Himalayan Foundation website, on my website, which is heathermcnice.com, there is a link to the AHF, but yeah, just Google AHF, and if they want to make a donation specifically to Bhutan, there's a comments box on the donation page, so they can request that on there.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'm
really
excited to have found your book to kind of read a lot about the culture of Bhutan and understand the villages that we're going to see when we're there up in the mountains, and also to have met Norbu, who I know is a great friend of yours and who has taken you on many adventures. So thank you for sharing those times with us. We're very excited to be going to Bhutan next year.
I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.